Northlanders. In the beginning of March, the Duluth News Tribune launched the Northlandia podcast, a weekly podcast that tells true stories of the unique and fascinating people and places you'll find exploring the Northland. Saturday, the podcast released its 8th episode, which focused on a pinball duo fixing machines and building a community. To give you an introduction to the stories Northlandia has to offer, we're providing the first episode here for you to listen. If you enjoy the episode, we encourage you to check out all the other stories Northlandia has to offer at DuluthNewsTribune.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy.
Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity because here you will find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this first episode, we journey just a short way up the North Shore to Two Harbors, where you can find a unique place to spend the night, included with Wi-Fi and a continental breakfast, but inside a train boxcar. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. To tell us more about this truly unique inn, I'm joined by Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter Jay Gabler. Jay, welcome to the inaugural episode of Northlandia.
Thanks, Wyatt. Honored to be here.
We had an interesting visit up to the Northern Rail Traincar Inn, so go ahead and tell us about the inn.
Yeah, you and myself and our colleague Clint Austin, photographer, went up last month up the North Shore to Two Harbors. You go a little bit beyond Two Harbors in the North Shore, and you get to Betty's Pies, local landmark. And then just past Betty's Pies, you take a left, and you go into the woods, and you get to 10 boxcars lined up in 2 rows of 5 and turned into one of the region's, dare we say, the nation's most distinctive hotels.
Yeah, it definitely catches your eye when you first. It felt like it was like when I drove up there. Like I've never actually driven down that road before. Like I've driven past it along High 61 like 100 times. I've never turned down that way, and it's just like you come around that right turn, and it's just this stretch of boxcars that I just never would suspect was out there. And even when I took the drone up there, looking in from the sky above, it's just middle of nowhere, just nothing but trees, and then just this big stretch of boxcars.
Yeah. So there actually was never a rail line running through this property. The tracks that are there are a very short set of tracks that were put there specifically to hold these 10 boxcars that now serve as the Northern Rail Traincar Inn. The history of the inn dates back to 2001, when a woman named Linda Ellens, then named Linda Bracco, is from Minnesota, and she was vacationing out in California and happened to stay in the Napa Valley in an old caboose, a railway caboose that had been turned into a place we could stay overnight. And she thought that was so cool. She thought that they should do that in Minnesota. So she got back to Minnesota and went shopping for boxcars. I guess it wouldn't have occurred to me that you can just buy old boxcars, but you can.
She called Gopher State Scrap and said, "Do you sell used boxcars?" And they said, "Yes, we do." And she said, "How much?" And he said, 50-foot car is $2,500. And she said, "I'll take 10. Do you deliver?" And he laughed and said, "Not for free."
Linda doesn't own the inn any longer. It is now owned and operated by Cindy and Jeff Ryder, the couple that you and I met, Wyatt, when we went up there. Of the two, Cindy is the talker, and she had plenty to say about the history of this hotel. In fact, she remembers she and her husband living in Two Harbors at the time the inn was being built.
The history is that a gal named Linda Ellens, Bracco at the time, she and her new husband stayed at a converted caboose in Napa Valley, California, back in 2000 and said, "Oh, I have to build something with trains." And because she liked that. So she came back and bought the property from Betty Lassard and her sister. And then she started working on trying to get cabooses. Oops. Notice we're not made with cabooses. So they were too hard to find and they could not travel by rail. So if you found one in Pennsylvania, you couldn't just say, "Well, drag it on out here." They won't do it because they've been out of service for too long. And they brought the boxcars to Two Harbors, and then from Two Harbors to here, they came by semi-trucks. They had to have huge cranes both places. Take the box off, take the wheels off. The wheels are called the trucks. Take the box off and put it on a semi. Take the trucks off, put it on the next semi, and just keep doing it. Bring it out here, unload the wheels first, then the box, and keep going 10 times.
So Jay, maybe we should explain for those who haven't gone to visit there like we have, what does a hotel or inn with train box cars in it even look like? How does that even function?
So what they decided to do was line these 10 boxcars up in 2 rows of 5. Now, between those 2 rows, there's a central hallway, which is now enclosed. They built an enclosure over it. And then at the end, there's a little depot building where actually Cindy and Jeff live as the proprietors of the inn. So when you go to stay at this inn, what you're doing is you're walking in through this depot and you're hanging a right, and then you're walking down this enclosed interior hallway between these 2 rows of boxcars, and you're turning off to either side to go into any of 15 different hotel rooms that are made out of these boxcars. If you're wondering, wait, how do you get 15 hotel rooms out of 10 boxcars? It's because some boxcars share rooms. So some rooms these aren't huge rooms. And so in some cases they can fit more than one in a car. Others, you've got a car and then even a little bit more room for the larger sized rooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she kind of showed us each of the boxcars and like how they had, or they're essentially like VIN numbers, where kind of like you can see each car's identification number and all the histories just written across the walls throughout this lengthy hallway.
Yeah, and we should explain that the interiors of these cars have been quite extensively renovated. So you see from the outside, oh, I'm walking into a space where this is made out of 10 different boxcars. And then when you're in that central hallway, you can look to either side, and that's where you see those numbers you're describing, Wyatt, where this shows the history of the car, and the logos of the different railroads the cars were used for stenciled on the side there. These cars were all built, by the way, between 1960 and 1972, and were then retired because, well, they were getting a little worn, and boxcars actually got bigger, so they were replaced with bigger models, generally speaking. So these had been retired. And the cars themselves, once you get in the cars, have actually been extensively renovated so that the walls, the old interior walls of the boxcar, have been obscured by sheetrock or some such. So the walls are white and there are nice pictures hanging on them. The different cars, the different rooms, in fact, have different themes. There's like the lighthouse room, the safari room, the bear room. So they sort of look like standard hotel rooms, maybe a little on the small side from the inside. And also there have been windows cut in the exterior, so you can look out into the beautiful North Woods location of this inn. But then when you look up, if you're in one of the rooms, you do see the original boxcar ceilings, which are wood, and in many cases they've been, scarred by the freight that was, slid around in them during their active years, and they're sort of scraped. There's some burn marks in some cases because rail riders, some might call hobos, would ride in these boxcars when they were empty and then would, light fires for warmth. And so you can see some soot markings. And some of these rail riders actually signed the cars. So because the walls, which would have had most of the signatures and graffiti and what have you, the interior walls are covered up. Where you see most of the evidence of the rail riders that once called these cars home for a night or perhaps longer is up on these wooden ceilings that you can see when you look up.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing how it's kind of the combination of comfort and like unique themed rooms like the Bear Room, but combined also with this like unique lived-in history of these cars,
Yeah, definitely the most distinctive mark that survives from the former rail riders is the signature with 2 different dates of Bad Bob, the wild albino. Back in the 80s, Bad Bob was riding the rails, and one of the cars he rode in is now part of this inn in northern Minnesota. And apparently, now this is, there's no way to really prove this, but Cindy Ryder believes that Bad Bob may have come back for a visit, not just in corporeal form, but possibly in ghost form.
So I'm giving a guided tour. We're in this room. We look at the Bad Bob, and then we're coming in here. We're in the bedroom, and this lady stops me. And she says, "Did you know you're haunted?" I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Did you know you're haunted?" And I said, "No. Whatever could you be talking about?" And she said, "Well, you're haunted, and he's just lost. It's a guy, and he's just lost." And I said, "It's got to be Bad Bob." So we go on, and several months later, I'm giving another tour, same exact spot, in that room. This woman says, "Have you ever been told you have a spirit here?" No, what could you be talking about? She says, "Well, he's just confused and doesn't know he doesn't belong here." They both said, "I'm a sensitive. I can feel these things. I can hear these." And I'm just like, you guys. Anyway, so yes, that happened twice. Then the third story is there was a couple here. They were sleeping. She couldn't sleep. She came out here. She laid on the couch. She fell asleep. She heard walking all night in front of the couch. She didn't get up. It's one of those things where you hear it and you get annoyed by it, but you don't really wake up. And she said she heard it all night. She yelled at her husband in the morning and said, "If you couldn't sleep, why didn't you walk in the hallway instead of in front of me?" And he said, "Honey, I never got out of bed."
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more interesting locations to spend the night at. In fact, she even mentioned a few times how they've made some interesting lists for unique places to stay.
We've been on the Best of Minnesota. We've been on TripAdvisor's list of the quirkiest hotels in the country. The top 10, well, we were on one iVillage's list of the craziest hotels. Now, I don't think the hotel's crazy. I think it's cool, it's quirky, it's, boutique-y. The owner is certifiably nuts.
Yeah, the inn has a unique vibe. It is certainly a destination for train enthusiasts called foamers because they foam at the mouth, and I think they embrace that label with pride. And so they'll come from all over for the opportunity to stay at this place. And sometimes apparently they even will bring collectibles, artifacts from train history to trade for overnight stays. They'll bring, so there are lamps and clocks and other items from train history that are now part of the hotel's collection. But it also kind of has a cozy cottage vibe throughout as well. Wyatt, you and I were there in February, the dead of winter, and so it was very wintry in the decor. There are a lot of little snowman figurines around and little winter villages and what have you. So it definitely has that cozy cottage feel to it as well. I would love to stay at this inn sometime. We didn't get to stay overnight during our visit, but I would definitely go back, stay overnight. If ever I needed to stay in Two Harbors, why not stay in a train car, And I would bring my copy of The Boxcar Children, one of my favorite books from when I was growing up. And the accommodations at the Northern Rail Traincar Inn are definitely more comfortable than the Boxcar Children had, who, as I recall, had to sleep on pine needles. You're not going to need to do that at the Northern Rail Traincar Inn, but you are nonetheless sleeping in a boxcar, which I have certainly never done before, and I would definitely love to crack that book once again in an actual boxcar.
And if you forget that book, they have plenty of viewing material for you. How many DVDs did they say they have?
They have a whole DVD collection. They might be one of the largest video stores effectively in the area with that DVD collection that we saw that they have. And yeah, they've got books as well. And they have snowshoes that you can borrow in winter if you want to go out and explore the terrain. They often will be out there with a bonfire at night if you want to pull up a chair and hear the stories of the inn. And Cindy and Jeff are happy to share those stories. They've been running the inn now for 15 years. Well, Cindy's been working there for 15 years. They've been owning it now for just about a decade. And Cindy said every day for the last 15 years, she has told the distinctive story of the Northern Rail Traincar Inn, and she's happy to keep on doing it every day as long as she and Jeff are running the place.
That's a long time to be committed to this. And as I understand, this is also this is their home. It's their home and their business. But what's interesting to me was that how she had a very different view of the initial enterprise when it was first being built back in 2001, when those train cars were first being moved.
I'll be honest with you. Our home is downtown Two Harbors, about a block and a half from the train tracks. And when they brought those boxcars in and started driving them past our house, I turned to my husband and said, honey, that woman's crazy. Nobody is going to pay to stay in those nasty boxcars. And here we are.
Well, surprise, surprise, people love staying in boxcars. And this is actually part of a growing set of opportunities to stay overnight in train cars in our region of the country here. The Lake Superior Railroad Museum and North Shore Scenic Railroad here in Duluth have just acquired a dome sleeper car that Wyatt, you and I visited for an earlier article, and they are hoping that they're going to be able to get that literally online as potentially a rolling Airbnb that you could rent for a night or more, and you would board this sleeper car in Duluth. The train would pull it to Knife River, which is between Duluth and Two Harbors, park it there for as long as you want to hang out, and they'd come pick it up and pull you in your Airbnb train car back to Duluth.
But it's still not the same as having 10 boxcars with a long stretching hallway with all of them still connected together.
Yeah, there's nothing in the world, to the rider's knowledge, that is quite like this. It is not super rare to be able to stay overnight in a train car. I mean, check out Airbnb.com. They've got their OMG category for unusual spots. You'll see there are, all sorts of different train cars where you can park yourself in overnight. But to have this kind of a configuration where they've got these rows of boxcars that have been turned into an actual working hotel with your continental breakfast and your Wi-Fi and what have you, this is truly unique. And the setting is just so beautiful too. You're staying in an old train, but you're also staying in this, beautiful bucolic setting. So it's a neat place both on the inside and outside.
And Jay, can you go ahead and tell us, how did you even come about finding this story?
It was a tip from a reader. I had a reader write to me and say, just appreciate all the unique stories that you're telling there at the News Tribune. Have you heard about this place? And I was like, I have not heard about that place. And that sounds like it would be a great Northlandia story.
So besides the train enthusiasts and the foamers, as she called them, who would you say this inn is for? Is it for families and with kids, or is it more for a lover's getaway?
Could be either, I would say, Wyatt. We did hear from Cindy that she has taken some care to make it a family-friendly place. Kids might be a little frustrated. They're not allowed to run down the central hallway, which might be tempting for some. But the graffiti has all been checked, double-checked, triple-checked to make sure that there's no untoward words visible. Cindy did admit that she was really taken care, she and her husband Jeff, to preserve the cars as much as they were, for authenticity. But she said she did feel the need to get some acrylic paint after a child brought one particular word to her attention. And so she just changed one letter in this word, in this graffiti inscription. So the word now says slug.
That's probably a change for the better, I'd say. Well, Jay, is there anything else that stood out to you about our visit to the Northern Rail Traincar Inn?
I did not partake of any of the swag that they had available, but they've got a whole little gift shop with mugs and some other items with the inn logo, but they also take in crafts from local makers. So in the hotel office, you can check out what the locals have been producing, everything up to and including tick removers, which I guess, handy thing to have with you in the North Woods. Also, I'm sorry we didn't get to try the breakfast. I'll bet it's delicious.
All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Jay, for joining us on this first episode. We look forward to seeing what you have for us the next time you join our Northlandia.
Maybe we'll get on a train that moves.
Maybe. And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read Jay's article for this week's column, as well as see photos by Clint Austin and video produced by myself, visit DuluthNewsTribune.com/topics/Northlandia. In next week's episode of Northlandia, News Tribune reporter Joe Bowen introduces us to Troy Rogers, also known as Robot Rickshaw, who you may have seen peddling his unique brand of avant-garde electronica somewhere in the Zenith City. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe could have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnews.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.